Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. Welcome to your foundation, Al-Furqan, within the London Talks that we organize periodically. And as you have seen, for those who have been before in this kind of lectures and series, we try every time to shed light onto a new topic related in one way or another to the Islamic heritage overall. It so happened that in the last couple of lectures we have been sort of rounding around the topic of the arts and architecture, which is interesting because it's such a rich field, and obviously the lectures were related to so many different aspects of the Islamic art and architecture. Tonight is one of those special topics and aspects that our guest speaker will tackle. Nevertheless, I do apologize for the late start. As you know, today was announced a tube strike, a never-ending story in London. Although it was called out last moment, but probably quite late. We did expect a bit more audience, but nevertheless, again, as you know, our lectures are recorded usually, and then much more people benefit from such important lectures. We are greatly honored tonight to have with us Professor Robert Hillenbrand, a well-known professor, well-known scholar, who kindly agreed to honor us with his presence tonight and his lecture. I must mention he is accompanied by the other well-known professor, Professor Carol Hillenbrand, who happened to be his wife as well, and co-scholar, co-researcher as well, and hopefully next time might be the next lecture, I guess. But tonight the floor will be Professor Robert's one. Well, Professor Robert, I'll give an overview a bit later, but it's such a pleasure to have him with us tonight, and he will tackle another aspect tonight on Islamic art and architecture, mainly to do with the writing, as he called it, writing word as an icon, writing and its use as a sacred visual symbol or as an icon. Before I introduce him and kindly ask him to the floor, it gives me a great honor and pleasure to invite our chairman, Mr. Sharaf Ahmed Zaki Yamani, to welcome you and say a few words, and then we'll move to the lecture. So please, Sharaf, the floor is yours.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Sally. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Distinguished friends and colleagues, it gives me a lot of pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's public lecture hosted by the Al-Furqan Foundation. I'm also extremely honored to welcome to the Al-Furqan Foundation for the very first time, and hopefully not the last time, Professor Robert Hillenbrand, one of the most distinguished voices in the study of Islamic art and architecture, and across a landmark of work and initiatives spanning more than 5 decades. His scholarship has fundamentally transformed the way the world reads the visual language of the Islamic civilization. We are deeply honored to have him and his lovely wife, such a power cultural couple, I have to say, and we are honored this evening with both your presence. Tonight's topic, the role of writing as icon, addresses one of the most profound innovation in the Islamic civilization. Where other cultures separated text from imagery, Islamic artists made writing itself sacred. This is not merely a decorative decision or an ambition, but really a theological statement. They believed that the divine word deserved divine beauty, and that calligraphy could embody the infinite perfection of God's revelation. And every civilization is recognizable by the way they shape their letters. Roman capitals still carry the gravitas of the empire. Chinese characters still carry centuries of contemplation and discipline. Islamic calligraphy carries its own unmistakable signature, the conviction that beauty is inseparable from truth, and the form must rise to meet the meaning. These icons are part of our cultural DNA. They are the visual codes by which a civilization recognizes itself. And also in our own time today, these icons continue to speak. The inscription on a Mamluk lamp, the carpet pages, and the borders of a Quranic manuscript, the calligraphic crown of a Mongol ark, they remind us quietly but unmistakably that we belong to something older, something deeper, and far more enduring than the urgencies of the present. And this is precisely why the Al-Furqan Islamic Heritage Foundation exists today, and why our founder, may God rest his soul, Sheikh Ahmed Zaki Amani, saw with such clarity the urgent need to bring it into being. For nearly 4 decades, the foundation has worked both to preserve the Islamic written heritage, but also to revitalize our reflection on the fundamentals of the faith, rescuing manuscripts from oblivion, returning forgotten voices to the cultural mainstream, and ensuring that this legacy does not lie silent in archives, but continue to shape how we think, how we reason, and how we live. My father believed that manuscripts are more than just ink on parchment, and tonight Professor Hillenbrand will demonstrate that the inscription is more than just letters on stone. They are the visible memory of a civilization that believed knowledge was a trust, and beauty a form of both expression and worship. And to preserve them is to keep that trust alive, and to remind the world that the Islamic heritage is not a closed chapter, but also a living conversation. Once again, thank you for being here with us in your foundation this evening. I have no doubt that Professor Hillenbrand will, with his characteristic depth, eloquence, and elegance, open new windows into a subject many of us thought we knew something about. I wish you an evening worthy of the subject, illuminating, generous, and unforgettable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharaf. Not that Professor Robert needs an introduction, but probably for those who will watch the lecture later. Professor Robert Hillenbrand was educated at Cambridge and Oxford, and has spent most of his career teaching at the University of Edinburgh, with visiting professorships at Princeton, UCLA, Bamberg, Dartmouth College, Leiden, New York, Cairo, and Groningen. He was Professor of Art History at the University of St. Andrews for 7 years. He has organized 9 symposia on Islamic art, plus a major exhibition on Persian paintings. His scholarly interests focus on Islamic architecture, painting, and iconography, with particular reference to Iran and early Islamic Syria. He has written 12 books and co-authored, edited, or co-edited a further 14. He has also published some 208 articles on aspects of Islamic art and architecture. He has been a Slade Professor of Art at Cambridge. He's a Fellow of the British Academy, and won the King Faisal Prize for Islamic Studies in 2023, so quite recent. He is the founding editor of the Journal of Islamic Art and Architecture. There's so much else to be said, but it's a great honor to have such a prolific professor and figure among us tonight. His lecture tonight, as you have seen from the announcement, is entitled "The Word as Icon, the Role of Writing in Islamic Art." where he will analyze the many different uses to which writing is put in Islamic art, most obviously as a way not just to decorate and articulate architecture, but to add meaning to it and to proclaim the faith in public places. The other interesting aspect that I hope Professor will kindly share with us tonight is because he's not a simple researcher in this field or professor, but from what I know and what I've heard from him, he has touched this script, he has lived with those scripts, he has sensed them, so that will be the added value hopefully that he will add to his lecture tonight. Thank you so much, Professor, for being with us tonight, and the floor is yours, so please join me in welcoming Professor Rose. Thank you.
I suppose there's a kind of contradiction between using the word icon alongside the word word. And I'll do something unusual and begin with a quotation from the New Testament, the Gospel according to St. John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. Do you know, that could really apply extraordinarily well to the world of Islam. Islam came into the Mediterranean world in the early 7th century, and there was already a pair of religions that had long established roots. In the Iranian world, the Zoroastrians. In the Christian world to the west, Christianity. So what was Islam going to do in the visual arts to assert itself? Well, all of you know that Christian art uses images, and the image on the left is an image of Christ in judgment from a Greek church, Daphne, outside Athens. And it's in the dome. And that fearsome figure looks down on you, holding the book which contains your deeds and will be opened on the last day. That then is the standard Christian icon. On the right, the standard Muslim one. And do you know, I've never seen a Christian church that has the word God filling a wall. The simplicity of it, it takes your breath away. It's staggering. The man stands there looking at the word Allah. He is insignificant. The word engulfs him. Now, it could have been that Christianity would have walked down the same road. There's a combination of image and writing, top right, Jesus as the Alpha and Omega, the first and the last, and then bottom left, Christos, an abbreviation of Christ, with Alpha and Omega on either side. But, to quote Robert Frost, that was a road not travelled. Christianity moved in a different direction towards images. Let me begin then by looking at some of the basic forms of writing. La Allah illa Allah wahdahu. There is no God but one, is the top line. Now look how the letters gradually begin to assume ornamental form. They sprout leaves in the second one. In the third one, we're in high summer. The letters have become flowers. They bloom. Those first three, reading from the top, are all forms of Kufic, which is the stately script for significant inscriptions. The fourth one down is a scribal hand, Nasr, the kind of writing that you would use for a laundry list or a shopping list, but that doesn't mean that you can't use it for excellent purposes, religious purposes as well. But it's a scribal hand. It's not, as it were, carved. And that in its turn becomes more complicated as time goes by. You'll notice the thickening of the letters, the elevation of the shafts, their fattening. You'll notice that the inscription becomes a double-decker inscription. And finally, the Persian solution, Nastaliq, developed in the 14th century and full of swoops and glides and compressions and vast extensions. It becomes a dynamic, living form of script that scarcely has rules. There are, of course, rules, but they're not obvious. Now, I could bore you by taking you through the various subtypes of writing, but I have no intention of doing so. I'd rather show you what Muslims did with writing. And these are things that in the Christian world were never done. For example, I don't know a single Christian church which has a single chapter from the New Testament on its walls. Christian architects and craftsmen did not use writing. Muslims did. The contrast could not be more extreme. Christian art, for the most part, is, in the medieval period, anonymous. Not so for Muslims. There are upwards of 6,000 craftsmen's signatures on objects, buildings, manuscripts, you name it, in the Muslim world. So writing is pervasive, and it changes the surfaces that it covers. We'll see how that works. A riddle. One word, Ali, repeated in different colours, in slightly different scripts, again and again and again. At first sight, you might think this was some form of cubist art. It has balance, it has symmetry, above all, it has meaning, because reading it is like reading and reciting a prayer. And this is critical. You need to go slow. You need to give time to contemplate. You need to have time to let these words sink in. However familiar they are, the more difficult they are to read, the more you are likely to take them into your heart and your soul. So the difficulty of decipherment is not just a challenge to your ingenuity, it's a form of piety, it's a form of prayer. That may look small, but it's higher than this room. It's in a Sufi shrine outside Isfahan in Iran. datable around 700 Hijri, 1300 Christian era. And it consists of partly prayers and partly the 99 beautiful names of God. You begin at the bottom, Allahumma Salla Allah Muhammad al-Mustafa wa Salla, and by that time you've got to the end of the bottom line and you go up. How on earth could an artist torture the Arabic alphabet in this way? The source is beyond doubt. It's Chinese seal writing, which entered the Muslim world through the Mongols because they ruled China as well as much of the Eastern Islamic world. And so the extraordinary adaptability of the Arabic alphabet was put to new uses. And as you gradually decipher that, the message seeps into you slowly. And it also has an awesome presence because of its height. It's 30 feet high, 10 meters high. So it dominates the place where it's found. Well, nowadays we all wear t-shirts with logos, and there's nothing new under the sun. So here's a 10th century equivalent. It's not a t-shirt, and it certainly doesn't advertise Coca-Cola. It tells you who the man's boss was and what his job was. Zadan Farooq, a Buyid treasurer in Baghdad under Shiite rule. On his back, on his front, on his sleeves, he is a walking advertisement for his ruler and for himself, for he has titles himself. This is a saddle cloth, so the person, and it was draped over a horse, and the person sitting on the horse would look down and would read the message at the bottom, which says, may God lengthen the life of the Qa'id. And this man was a high official, the Qa'id Bukhtagin. May God lengthen his life. Well, unfortunately, he was convicted of embezzlement 6 months after this was woven and suffered a long and painful death as a result. So that was a hope destined not to be fulfilled. Well, here is a shirt that one of the Ottoman sultans wore into battle. A talismanic shirt because it has the entire Quran written on it. Now, this particular sultan believed in God, but he kept his powder dry because he wore armor underneath the shirt. But there's nothing wrong with covering your options. Here's a detail of it. Chinese script, more Chinese script, Quranic verses, and all of this is micography. Micography is minute script that you need basically a magnifying glass to write. And Islamic calligraphers were men of intense ingenuity. There's a story of a man called Umar al-Aqta, who worked for Tamburlaine, Timur, in the early 15th century. And he presented the illiterate conqueror with a walnut, which had the entire Quran inside it. And Timur looked at it and he said, "What's this?" and dismissed him. 2 years later, Umar al-Aqta came back carrying a Quran. But it wasn't just him that was carrying it, it was a team of oxen that were carrying 4 carts with the largest Quran ever made, taller than me. And that caused the sarcastic ruler to withdraw his disapproval. It's a plate. It's a plate that was used for food, but at the same time as being used for food, it tells you things. This is one of a group of ceramic dishes made in eastern Iran and in Transoxiana, in what is now Central Asia, in the 10th and 11th centuries. It shows Kufic script of a highly stylized form, the letters stretched and stretched, or compressed and compressed, almost as if you were playing an accordion. And as you eat, there's a message. And the message can sometimes refer to food. It may say, "The wise man avoids greed." Or it may say, right at the bottom of the bowl, "Eat, eat, eat, eat," so that you don't leave the food. In this particular case, modesty is one of the characteristics of the people of paradise. That's found on 35 surviving bowls and is by far the commonest message on these plates. The message is one thing. The way the message is written is quite another. This is writing that creates beauty of a high intellectual order. And once again, part of the purpose of it is for you to decipher it. Sometimes these inscriptions are so difficult to decipher that no one has yet managed to read them. And I imagine that when you bought one of these, you also bought a crib, so that when your guests admired it and tried to read it, you could say, "Oh, you can't read it? This is what it says." One of the most astonishing uses of epigraphy, and I say epigraphy and not calligraphy. Epigraphy is writing. Calligraphy is beautiful writing. Kalos, beauty. Graphine, to write in Greek. So this is not calligraphy, it is epigraphy. And it is one of the most extraordinary innovations that came with Islam. And it came within 60 years of the Prophet's death. Now, by that time, there'd been a millennium of coinage around the Mediterranean, and it followed very strict rules. On one side, an image of the ruler. On the other side, an image with some religious power. If there was writing, there was very little of it. When the Muslims conquered Syria, they needed coins, they needed gold and silver. And to begin with, they bought it from the Byzantines. They bought their gold from the Byzantines so that Muslims were using coins that had Christian inscriptions and Christian images, which must have been disagreeable. Further east, they used silver of the pre-Islamic Persian Empire. And then Abd al-Malik, in 77 Hijri, introduced a total change in coinage, which operated throughout the Islamic Empire. He called in all the coins, melted them down, and created this. Coins that on both sides have nothing but writing on them. Now, if that doesn't tell you something about the importance of writing, the political importance, the religious importance, the platform importance of writing. I said a moment ago, it was unpleasant for Muslims to use Christian coins. Well, at the time of this coinage reform, the population of Syria was 95% Christian. So the coin that you used to buy cabbages or rice was an instrument of propaganda for Islam, was a missionary coin, was a coin that proclaimed the tenets of the faith. Right hand one, in the middle. La Allah illa Allah wahdahu la sharik lahu. There is no deity except Allah alone. He has no companion. And round the corner, round the rim rather, a Quranic verse. On the other side, Allahu al-Ahad, Allahu al-Samad, Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad. God is one. God is eternal. He does not beget. He is not begotten. What is this? It's a frontal attack on the Christian Trinity and the Christian incarnation. It says God cannot have a son. Now imagine being a Christian and having to use those coins. This is the power of writing, the political power, the religious power, the propaganda power, and it works 24/7, and it's legible. Can you imagine wearing a robe that repeats the word God 1,400 times? I have to say, that leaves me speechless, which would make both my daughters laugh. I said a moment ago that writing was used to cover all sorts of objects. We've seen writing on textiles, we've seen writing on clothing, we've seen writing on ceramic plates. Now we're looking at an incense burner. An incense burner with legs, if you please, like the hut of Baba Yaga in Russian folk tales. What does it say? In the middle of the lower section, there is an inscription which tries to persuade you by the use of inlaid gold and radiation that it mimics the sun. This is solar symbolism. And the sun comes into Islamic titulature all the time. Shams-ad-Din, Shams-ad-Dawla, the sun of religion, the sun of the empire. And this goes right back to Assyrian times, where they had the same titles for high officials and rulers. This particular ruler is Sultan Muhammad ibn Qalawun, one of the Mamluk sultans. And if you look at 5 o'clock in the central one, you'll see that his personal name, Muhammad ibn Qalawun, is written closer to the center. And at the very center are the words, Is al-Mulana as-Sultan, glory to our Lord the Sultan. And you can also have toys. Experiments made for fun. Here an Ottoman scribe takes a dried leaf and writes on it, God is one. He does it in gold paint. It's a masterpiece of surpassing simplicity. But you can have more fun than that. You can have inscriptions that go along and then go up and then go along the top upside down. That's called boustrophodon, which is a Greek word describing the ploughman ploughing a field, and at the end of the row, he turns the oxen and goes down in the opposite direction. And you see that in the left-hand side, where the minaret is decorated with Al-Azimat Allah, mightiness belongs to God. Or the letters begin to acquire life. They end in heads. And then, more than that, the letters turn into bodies. And the bodies are doing things. They're running, they're jumping, they're tickling each other under the chin, they're fighting. All of that inlaid, all of it writing. And it's clearer if you see it as a drawing. Top left, Al-Izz, splendor. Al-Iqbal, prosperity. Wad-Dawla, empire or power. Was-Sa'adat, happiness. Second line. Was-Salamat, peace, and so on. I mean, what is all this saying? It's basically either a series of benedictory phrases, so it's a form of prayer, or if you don't like that, you could say it just says, have a nice day. I don't know which of the two is right. What I do know is that the ability to turn writing into groups of people doing all sorts of things, hunting, fighting, doing gymnastics, cuddling, takes writing into a totally new area. And there's more to come. There is writing as talisman, as amulet, as protection from the evil one. This is an opening page which was matched by a closing page of a Spanish Quran. There was a very widespread belief about the power of magic, the devilish power of magic in the medieval world, both in the Islamic world and in the Christian world. And you had to protect yourself from evil. And one way was to protect the entrance, the beginning of a book, the door that led into a palace or into a city. Baghdad used to have a monument called the Talisman Gate, and it had the decoration of two serpents with jaws agape being controlled by a seated ruler. That was apotropaic, a word meaning a protection against evil. Or you would put it on the threshold of your home so that no evil thing could walk across it. Here we have the same thing. The protection in this case is a knot. You will know the reference in the Quran to blowing on knots. And that's a reference to witches. Now, here you have the last surah of the Quran, whose shafts turn into what you could call a mousetrap, turn into an elaborate, decorative, but also knotted device into which the demon will fall. And if the demon is not repelled by the knot, the demon will be repelled by the Quran. Very often the same idea is used in the expression of pentangles, polygonal forms that have 5 points, and they are also amuletic and magical, and made more so by the holy names that they have. They're the names of the 4 Rashidun caliphs and Muhammad and God. Let's look briefly at how the Quran was written. The first thing to remember is that from very early times, Muslims performed feats of memory which are very hard for Western people to understand today. I remember giving a class in Edinburgh to second-year students. There were 150 people in the class, and I had to give the same tutorial 10 times, each time to 15 students. And in the first outing of that tutorial, I mentioned that it would be hard to find a village in the Muslim world where there wasn't a child that knew the Quran by heart. And 2 of the students broke into laughter. And I said, "You don't believe me?" "No, we don't," they said. So I said, "Well, let's do an experiment. Now, I'm not going to call you out on this, but can anyone here recite anything? It can be a pop song, it can't be the Lord's Prayer, but it can be a piece of poetry, a pop song, anything at all that's 10 lines long. And if you can do that, put your hand up." No one put their hand up. And by the time that I got to the end of the week, and I'd asked that same question of 150 students, intelligent students, only one of them had put her hand up. And I asked her, "What is it that you've learned?" And she looked rather shamefaced. And she said, "Well, I'm in a play next Friday and I've learnt my lines." So, not to beat about the bush, those students had their heads full of cooked spaghetti. They had no muscle. They had no mental muscle up here. And what you're seeing there is the creation of mental muscle. And this is very important because it explains that Quranic manuscripts with texts that are difficult to read can be read if you know what the text says. This is how we begin. And like many early Bibles in the Christian world, what you see there is an awareness that parchment is very expensive. And so you must use all of it. And there's virtually no margin. and the lines are very crammed. And that's how the earliest Qurans looked. And then something dramatic happens. There is a growing belief that the sacred text really is sacred. It is the word of God. God spoke in Arabic. You must show it respect. And so what we begin to get is a controlled script, a script that looks beautiful, that is the objective correlative of the awesome enigmas of the sacred text. It tells you without words, this is important, which was not the case for that. And what's more, the text is so written that you can see rhymes in it. Look at the last word in each of those 4 lines. So there you have the scribe beginning to control the way that he writes the text to make a beautiful effect. And that effect is amplified by an extremely decorative frame. This is a Quran that was discovered in Sana'a, in the roof of the mosque, where a sack was full of 40,000 Quranic fragments that had been deposited there in the 10th century. Some neat and tidy librarian went through the library, pulling out damaged leaves, not burning them, not throwing them away, putting them in a sack and putting them up in the roof of the mosque. They were found in 1972, and they've totally transformed the knowledge of how the early Quran was written. And you can see here the varieties of Kufic script that gradually developed. Compressed, expanded, chopped up. By golly, chopped up. Sometimes a sheet has 11 words on it. Now the labs have got onto these parchments, and they've discovered that a parchment like that is actually the skin, the stomach of a fetal calf. That means that a pregnant cow was killed for its calf, its fetus, because that was the best parchment that you could make. And a cow, the possession of a cow, would be the difference between starving and not starving. And then you put 11 words on it. Can you imagine the size of such a Quran? It just grows and grows and grows. 60 volumes, going almost up to the ceiling here. We're looking at Qurans that in the economy of the time could be compared to a jet plane. The amount of money that it cost is just extraordinary. Now, that is the image on the right is of a top quality Byzantine imperial gospel. And look how many words there are in comparison with what you see in these examples. And look too at what's happened to the script. I'm now not talking about the the style of it, but the fact that it's been cut up like pastry in a shop. And that means that you can't read it easily. You imagine reading tomorrow's paper chopped up into 3-letter, 4-letter, 2-letter combinations of letters. It would take you ages to work out what it said. We're back to memory. Now that's what I call a book. I have to say, every time I see that picture, I feel a sense of awe. It's made from gazelle skin. Okay, today the gazelle is near extinct in some parts of the Islamic world. Obviously not then, but even so, that's an awful lot of gazelles. I'm lost in awe, I have to say, at the sheer range of variety of Quranic hands. The one on the left, the so-called nurses, wet nurses, Quran, made for a Zirid ruler in Ifriqiya around 1020. Look at the way that the letters are written. Thick, spatulate letters, and then razor thin in their descenders and ascenders. Or the one on the right, where the sacred text is embedded in elaborate scrolling decoration, as if it were a holy relic, which indeed it is. Look at the Lam Alif. Look at the extreme height of some of the shafts. We're looking there at recondite, almost musical rhythms, and words like repetition and syncopation come to mind as the letters are extended or compressed. I've talked to calligraphers, obviously not who did that, but who do play around with the proportions of the letters, and they can't explain what they're trying to do, but you can see, you can feel the rhythms. You can see, as you look at the entire page, the combinations between extreme elongation, extreme compression, the use of spacing, and so on, that there is much to be found out still in these extraordinarily inventive scripts. This one is on indigo dyed paper, which was a Spanish specialty in the 9th century. There are several gospels that are written like that, so this was probably made in Spain. But most of them, one has no idea where they came from. There's a particular style of cursive that's associated with the Maghreb, with the entire Western Maghreb from Morocco to Tunisia, with big loops. And Ibn Khaldun tells us that the calligraphic masters taught their pupils to write complete words rather than perfect the form of any one letter. And another way of making an inscription hard to read is by making it double-decker or triple-decker, sometimes using different colours to separate the inscriptions. You see gold being used at the top. And this is still a living tradition. Of all the forms of Islamic art, the one that has the most sap in it, the most energy, the most capacity to reinvent itself, is without doubt writing. Around the year 950, calligraphers began to feel that it was time to put their house in order and to create a script that was proportional, that was predictable. And the method is expressed in this drawing, that you fill the kalam, the pen, with ink and make a diamond. And 8 diamonds makes the letter Alif. And differently organized, they make the letter Ba or the letter Ha, and so it goes. And all these experiments culminated in a single Quran which survives in Dublin and was made by Ibn al-Bawab, the son of the doorkeeper. And here is the opening page. Look at the way the Bismillah is written, as if the words are chanted. In the name of God. That long extended line in the Fatiha, and you see it in Al-Baqarah, second one down. Now, people have written reams about this particular Quran, but let me just say that it is a breakthrough comparable to the printing press of Gutenberg, or the invention of the typewriter, or the invention of the computer. It is an enormous leap away from that gigantic Quran weighing a ton being studied by that Egyptian scribe. This Quran fits into your pocket. You can put it next to your heart. It will protect you. It will give you emotional and spiritual support. It is written in thoroughly legible script with all the diacritical points, with kasra and fatha and dhamma. So suddenly, it's like translating the Bible from Latin into English, for which people were burnt in the early 16th century. But in 11th century Baghdad, no one got burnt. And suddenly, the Quran was open to everybody who could read. And make no mistake, this was a literate society. In the year 853, the largest library in Europe was the monastic library of St. Gall in Switzerland. It had 843 volumes. 70 years later, the Umayyad Caliph in Cordoba had his library catalogued. The catalogue took up 55 elephant folios, and it recorded 400,000 books. 400,000 books in Cordoba, 843 in Switzerland. Do I need to say any more? And this is the basis for widespread literacy, especially in Quranic studies, in the medieval Islamic world. This one manuscript, light, relatively cheap. I mean, a page was sold for 30 dinars, even in his own lifetime, so it wasn't cheap. But there were loads of copycats that were much cheaper. You could carry the Quran around with you. You could read it whenever you wanted. You could use it for spiritual protection and sustenance. And when I read the major monograph on it, I read that he was so meticulous that he always wrote the letters in the same way. And I couldn't believe that. So I sat down one afternoon and I spent 3 hours reading one page. And I found that, for instance, the letter Kaf took 6 different forms. And I was very pleased to discover that, and to discover that Ibn al-Bawwab was a human being. He wasn't a creature of AI, and he wasn't a typewriter. So when he needed to, he expanded. When he needed to, he compressed. Sometimes he went above the line, sometimes he went below the line. It was alive. It had soul. But look how beautifully legible it is. It put all earlier Qurans to shame in that respect. I must come to an end. Conversion. In 1957, a French archaeologist discovered what local villagers had known for many years, that there was a massive minaret in the center of Afghanistan. It dates to 1170, and it has the titles of the Sultan of the Ghurid dynasty who built it. It's some 200 feet high. But what it really is a building that is a book. Because all around its shaft, it has the complete Surah 19, Surat Maryam, all 97 verses. Now, even into the 20th century, this area of Afghanistan was a center of paganism. So in the 12th century, I can imagine a local villager who was not a Muslim turning the corner and seeing this amazing thing and being scared stiff. What do the words say? He can't read them. Are they a curse? Are they a blessing? Are they directed at him? And Surat Maryam became the favored Quranic surah for missionaries moving eastwards into Southeast Asia and Indonesia in the following centuries. So that is a symbol of power. It's a symbol of Islam, but more than that, it's also a means of conversion. There is the surah transcribed, and it forms knots. So once again, that theme of knotting as a way of repelling evil finds its niche. And every single knot has parts of that Quranic surah. And I will end with that, the light verse in the Quran. God is the light of the heavens and the earth. The similitude of his light is a lamp in a niche. The niche holds a lamp like a glittering star. It is kindled from a blessed olive tree, neither from the east nor from the west. And its oil glows forth, although no fire touches it. Light upon light, God gives his light to whom he will. And God speaks to man in allegories, for God is the knower of all things. Now those words are around that tile, which has, as you see in the bottom, a lamp. So this is a very clear example of the use of Quranic symbolism in art. And if you look at the lamp, you must imagine it not in a museum, for goodness sake, but hung in the dusky penumbra of a mosque with a wick inside. And so the Surat An-Nur, the Surah of Light, is brought to life in front of your very eyes as you walk down an aisle with lamp after lamp after lamp reminding you that God is the light of the heavens and the earth. And by the way, it's a bonus to have your own name as the Amir who paid for all these lamps lit up in neon lighting below the Quranic verse. So it serves both God and man. And that might be a good way to end. Thank you.
Well, what a fascinating way to conclude this amazing and inspiring and interesting presentation and lecture. Thank you so much, Professor. It was such a great honor and pleasure. I would like to keep listening all the night, really. It's never enough, really, to... But thank you so much. We are running a bit late. We'll try to, probably in 15 minutes, we'll get some questions or any comments or any...
No, I just wanted to know if that beautiful minaret, whatever you call it, a column in Afghanistan, is it still there?
It's still there.
Wonderful. Wow, great.
It's still there. It has been very damaged by recent floods. So an Italian team and then an Australian team have buttressed it. Yeah. It's probably the finest minaret of the Eastern Islamic world.
Fantastic. One more thing. You know, at the beginning, the first pictures, there was, Quranic, I think the Sultan, one of the Sultans, I think, Quran. There was in the middle two, and it was round, circled by black. The 7 pointed stars. Are they Islamic, the 7 pointed?
It's not a 7 point, it's a 5, a pentangle.
No, at the beginning it was 6. The first.
I wonder whether we're talking about the same.
No, maybe
I'll
the
go back.
Fourth pictures or this one. Yeah, before this one.
This one.
Is it the two rounded in the circle?
Oh yes.
On the top.
Oh yes, that's Khatam Suleiman.
Khatam Suleiman. Okay.
It's the seal of Solomon. So once again, because Solomon was the great thaumaturge, the great magician who controlled the jinn and spoke the language of the birds and the animals, that had magical powers. Okay. And it was used, by the way, by Sultan Suleiman on the walls of Jerusalem, this very same theme. The Jews call it the Star of David.
Yeah.
Hello there, Doctor. My name's Sharif. Thank you for the talk, etc. I'm just wanting to ask, it's sort of on topic, but just about the Birmingham, Birmingham Quran, what kind of script it was, and another question, sorry, to add to that.
Sorry, the Birmingham Quran?
The Birmingham Quran, yes.
I didn't show that.
Yes, I understand that. I just wanted to see if you could benefit us, anything about it, any pointers towards it. And last thing, sorry to put you on the spot. With that said, was there any other like papyri or surviving bones that were written on Quranic script, etc. as well?
Well, many Qurans are written on paper. Most Qurans are written on paper. The early Qurans are written on parchment, and so they're very much more expensive and fewer in number. And some of them were dedicated to a given mosque, so that's where they were kept. But I don't think I'm answering your question. I don't think I hear a question.
Well, just is there any surviving, like, on bones? Because we've been taught in when we're studying Islam that they used to even, I'm not even sure if this is out of respect, but they used to even write on their sandals. I know they used to, their students of knowledge used to try and write down information on the sandals just because before paper came, etc. So is there any surviving bones, for example, or papyri from the ancient Egyptians? So
Oh, are you talking about the earliest writing of the Quran that was gathered together by Uthman? Is that what you're talking about?
even that as well. What was that written in? Yes.
Well, according to one text, the Quran was written on sherds of pottery, on pieces of bone, and in the hearts of men. And that's a very metaphorical way of putting it. But in 656, which is now 24 years after the death of the Prophet, Uthman, the Caliph Uthman, called everybody together who had anything, whether they had it on a piece of leather or a piece of bone or a piece of cloth or in their memory. And all these people's memories of the Quran were transcribed, and by a method which can no longer be discovered, it's lost in the mists of history, the standard text of the Quran was developed. Now, one of the discoveries that's been made in the Qurans that have come out of the Yemen, especially from Sana'a, is that in post-Uthmanic times, in the 8th and 9th centuries, there were variant readings of certain verses. And that is against what all the traditions of Islam say, which is that that text put together under the supervision of Uthman was an absolutely final text. So I'm no expert. I can't comment on that, but I do know that the paleographers who have looked at these Yemeni manuscripts have discovered minor, and I underline that word, minor variations in the text. And they found, when they tried to talk about it in public, that was an extremely unsafe thing to do. And one of them, whom I know personally because I worked with him, has gone underground for fear of his life. So it's a difficult issue.
Could you just repeat that? What are they escaping, talking about exactly?
Well, as I've just said, there are minor deviations in the vocalization of certain words.
The qira'at and the ahraf, or is that what you mean? The dialectual? Sorry, it's not your topic.
I'm not expert,
Yeah,
so I'm
sorry,
certainly not going to speak in public about it.
Sorry.
All I know is what I've been told, that these are minor variations, and not many of them, by the way.
Thank you.
Professor, if you allow me, just Brother Sharif, if I may, I'll just redirect you as far as the Birmingham Library folios of the Quran that were found in 2015. There's a detailed lecture. You can find it on our website. We have tackled that issue in detail, so you can find a lot of details about that. Obviously, the 2 papers, 4 pages are written in Hijazi script, so it's one of the among the oldest copies. But yeah, the lecture will tell you a lot, and we have got a published book as well in that regard. As far as the canonical readings and the variations, we have done a series of conferences. Again, you can find 3 conferences are published, but moreover, you can find them on our YouTube channel, the proceedings of those conferences that delve in details in terms of the history of the Quranic text, the evolution, and the canonical readings, including the so-called Sana palimpsest. So all those differences that Professor is hinting to, they are due to the so-called palimpsest issue, i.e. the copies that discarded bits and pieces, while so therefore those variations that. Yeah, you can find more details in that regard. I'm not an expert again, but from what I heard so far, because we deal with Islamic manuscripts overall, nothing found so far in terms of bones. They existed in the time of the Prophet. Part of that was written in bones, especially the Ektaf al-Ibil, i.e. the shoulders of the camels. But what we find is inscriptions on stones. So there's a huge project nowadays in Saudi Arabia that is gathering all the inscriptions of the Quranic verses that are scattered around in the desert. And there's a huge project in that regard. The results just started to come out now, but more is expected. And finally, when it comes to the papyri, as you know, there's a tradition in the Islamic heritage of writing manuscripts in papyri, but not to my knowledge any complete Quran written on papyri. As the professor kindly mentioned, the earliest Quranic manuscripts start with the parchments, and then they move to paper, but not necessarily papyri. There might be bits and pieces of fragments, but not huge parts, if that answers. But do visit our YouTube channel, please, our website, obviously, and you'll find a lot of insight into all these topics. Any other question?
About this variation, the Quran, I mean, what we read now is muhkam. It means that any letter or any variation in it, it breaks down because it's built on mathematics, on numbers, for example, the 12 seasons, the months, the days of the year. So if we remove apparently every one letter from it, the balance is affected.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. It's all based on mathematics,
Yeah.
So.
Any other question or comment? Please, just if you introduce yourself again, please.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you very much for a very interesting talk and history of the Islamic calligraphy. What I'd like to know is, the garment that was with the Quran, the whole of the Quran written on it. The Quran is meant to be sacred, but if men are wearing it and they are, obviously they need to go to the toilet, etc., how does it sit with the Islamic imams and things like that? Yeah.
I don't understand that question.
So the garment, which included the full Quran, she's asking that the Quranic script is sacred. So how did they behave in terms when they went to toilets or so on with such a garment on them?
Perhaps they took it off.
It was used mainly for ceremonies.
Yes, yes. As Salih says, it was a ceremonial thing. But it was a public proclamation of piety. And that's the point. And if you take nothing more from this lecture, you should take from it the ubiquity of the Quran in the Islamic material world. There's one Indian mausoleum after another in Delhi, for example, that has the complete Quran on its walls. I mean, it's a staggering thought. It shows how this was part of the warp and weft of Islamic life. The Fatiha is breathed into the ear of a baby and breathed into the ear of a dying person, so that your entire life is bookended by the Quran at both ends. And there just isn't an equivalent of that in any other religion that I've studied.
Any other question? Please.
Hello. Thank you so much, Professor, for the lecture. It was beautiful. I'll definitely start experiencing.
Just if you introduce yourself and keep the mic a bit closer.
Okay, I'm Malak. Yes, I got it. I'm Malak. Thank you so much for the lecture. It was a beautiful lecture about calligraphy, and I think what I took away from it is definitely when I start looking at it, I'll start experiencing it rather than just looking at it as a hobby. I just had a question about having these displayed in public spaces, and I was just wondering how it could influence people's spiritual awareness, just having it around, maybe subconsciously. And I just wanted to ask if you could expand on that thought and perhaps even maybe talk about how just being there could subconsciously affect non-Muslims as well, perhaps.
This was about the Quran in public places.
The overall inscription used in all these different subjects, but its spiritual impact, if I understood well, the spiritual impact of such inscriptions in all these objects, whether to Muslims and non-Muslims as well. Which you mentioned part of that, but you can expand a bit more on this.
I think the key point to remember is the ubiquity of the Quran. It's as if, I mean, people didn't smoke in the 15th century, or they didn't drink coffee in the 12th century. But it's as if you put the Quran round your coffee cup, or on your ashtray, or on your pillow, or on the mat on which you tread. It's everywhere. It always meets your eye, and you can't get away from it. And this is about the word. I'm back to the title of my lecture. The word as icon. It is the defining aspect of the Islamic faith, that it is a faith of words. And as I tried to explain, this was a society that was much, much, much more literate than Western society at the same time. It's not an accident that in many Western libraries there are more Islamic manuscripts than there are Christian manuscripts. Now that's against all common sense, but it's to do with the sheer output of the Quran in manuscripts, and not just in manuscripts. I've seen the Quran written on literally dozens of different places. Pieces of leather, coins, shoes, spectacles. I mean, it's ubiquitous. That's all I can say. Draw your own conclusions from that.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, if you allow me, I don't want to misuse my chairing the Professor. Just wanted to bring you back to the, probably it's part of that ubiquity that you're mentioning, the coins that you mentioned, the inscription of the God's Quranic verses, and obviously you mentioned one part of that, which is the proselytic part of the story, i.e. the missionary part. But I guess we could also hint to the fact that, as you know, there's a dispute, but there's a theory that why even the actual coins were named to start with as dinar. I mean, someone brings to the fact that din and nar, so being cautious as to how you use your wealth. But many studies tend to bring that kind of bringing the Quranic inscriptions on the coins as a remembrance to Muslims and non-Muslims that at the end of the day, the ultimate, owner of the wealth is God, and everything belongs to God. That it should be used in a very cautious way. Do you see that part of the story as well?
I think coins are really important because everybody has to use them, and use them whether they know what they say or whether they don't know what they say. But it's also interesting that there were standards to be met, standards of fineness, standards of weight, and even the name itself. Dinar doesn't come from dinar, it comes from denarius. It's a Latin word for a coin. One has to bear in mind that there were conventions for coinage which had been established in the Greek world and continued through the Greek world into Achaemenid Iran, and then Sasanian Iran, and into the Roman world. So it's not as if Abdul Malik invented the idea of coins, but he gave coins a much wider function than simply buying and selling or accumulating wealth. And if you look at the work of Kennedy, for instance, on the Muslim armies in the first century of Islam, we look at the pensions they were given, the soldiers, and it's quite plain that in a given year, 60 million dinars were minted. And the amount of dirhams was uncountable. So it's back to ubiquity. It's back to the idea that these things are everywhere. And they are portable propaganda. They're portable expressions of power, of religious faith, as well as having the functions that we associate with coinage today. They do something more. There's an extra element. That's the interesting thing.
Well, I think we'll stop here. Please do join me in thanking Professor Robert for this fascinating lecture. Thank you so much, Professor. And just before we close, we have a book as a word and an inscription as a plaque. It's not as beautiful as the ones that you showed. So please, Sharaf, join me kindly to present a token to Professor Robert.
Oh, goodness.
Got the book first. Yeah.
Oh, I don't even have that book. Wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Well, so that's one of the publications of Al-Furqan, and the author is the late chairman, Sheikh Ahmed Zaki Amani Al Yarhamu. So he speaks very detailed description of the Beit Khadija, the marital house, and his wife, his first wife. But what's more significant is that it's an archaeological and historical study, and you'll find a lot of archaeological, information inside.
Thank you
and
so
that's
much.
a small plaque
Oh, what a
of
lovely
Al-Furqan.
plate. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you. Thank you. Quite a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
you.
Professor. Thank you, Sharaf. Thank you to each and every one of you for joining us tonight. Obviously, hopefully, the lecture will be available later on our YouTube channel. We'll carry on with our events. Obviously, we're heading towards the summertime. It's a bit quieter. Our next lecture will be on the 23rd of September. It's interesting that it's quite related to this lecture tonight. We have Dr. Nassar Mansour from Jordan, a well-known calligrapher. he will talk to us about the Islamic scripts, history and evolution, where he is going to give an insight about all sorts of scripts, the types of scripts, and their evolution as well. But thank you so much for joining us. Please do follow our activities. We hope to see you again in our future events. And thank you so much to the Al-Furqan team for all their efforts and for bringing everything together. Have a good evening, safe journey back home. Hopefully you won't have disruptions with the tube strike.